It's the second to last day of the year, and we've got 5 things to watch for 26. These are not in any particular order. I've done something similar the past several years. So the first thing is, of course, going to be Donald Trump. You can't not have Trump on this list. Now, this also kind of includes the Republican Party because they are in the majority. So it's going to depend on what Congress passes and the president signs. That would also include things like appointments and judges. But it seems like Trump has pretty much dominated almost every single day of political news for the past 10 plus years. It's not going to change anytime soon, and you could see Republicans have to defend their majorities in the Senate, and especially narrow one in the House. We'll come back to that later on. But some of the upcoming issues are going to be this one right here. Congress returns to government funding impasse in January. We just went through that huge shutdown. Obviously, both sides want to blame each other, but I don't think Trump came out of that looking great. These battles always seem to happen. Both sides want to score political points. Hopefully, there's not going to be another shutdown, but you never know. It's a possibility. Then we've got the big one here. This is healthcare costs rise as lawmakers debate remedies. This is what the Democrats kind of dug in on the shutdown, extending the Obamacare subsidies. Now, I think healthcare is generally a winning issue for the Dems, so it makes sense that they leaned into this. It's such a complicated issue. Most people agree the status quo sucks, but changing things is where people start to freak out. I tend to think the free market approach on this particular issue is not all that appealing for a ton of Americans. That's why it benefits the Dems. They want to have some sort of government involvement, and I think most Americans are fine with that. Of course, details matter, but this issue is one that favors the Dems, and that's likely to help them in the upcoming election. Now, sticking with Trump, we can't forget about executive orders. Here's a list of his recent ones. Just like when Biden was in office, as we approached the next election, I kept saying executive orders are going to be something to take a look at. Even if things get struck down or they're unconstitutional, putting out these orders tends to get a lot of publicity. And the idea is Trump would put something out that most Americans are going to favor as we get closer to the midterms. So that's just one more tool in his toolbox. But all this is going to have an impact on his approval rating. Now here it is in the aggregate on Real Clear Politics. He's underwater by 10.7. He's sitting at 43%. About half of these polls have him even lower, some of them down even into the 30s. Now Trump has never been that popular, but still 43% doesn't look all that appealing. He's going to have to get that up 1 or 2 points at a minimum if Republicans are going to have a chance at holding the House. There's a segment of Trump voters that are low propensity. They're only going to turn out with him on the ballot, so it's possible they're still being missed by a bunch of these pollsters. But this is going to move into the second issue. That's the economy. Republicans are in power, they're going to get the blame for the economic sentiment. I said the same thing under Biden and the Dems. There's usually at least a few positive metrics you can point to in the economy, but if there's one or two that aren't that great, that's going to get all the attention. The inflation certainly spiked under Biden, but getting the prices actually to fall, that's a totally different story. I think voters might have been hoping that that could be the case with Trump back in office. The economy was one of his strengths in his first term. But the gist of this headline is Americans are angry about affordability, but gas prices are the cheapest they've been in most states. So that is a positive. I'm sure we'll take it. Maybe the prices do go back up, but if Dems were in office, I'm sure they'd be bragging about gas prices as well. But it is all about inflation. And here's the Consumer Price Index. This really shows you that huge spike under Biden. It topped off at over 9% in June of 22. Then it crashed down, but it's still been at about 3%, maybe a little bit lower since Trump got back into office. So nobody wants prices to go up. We'd all love them to go back down. Might be unreasonable for that to actually happen. But if you're looking for the rate of inflation, relatively speaking, it's not horrible, but obviously not good enough. Now here's Trump's approval rating on 4 issues. 3 of them are kind of similar. We've got immigration, then the economy, trade, and inflation. Trump's best issue is still immigration, but now he is underwater. The economy, he's underwater by 20%. So that's the stat that's got to start headed in the right direction. It's just going to be so easy for Dems to focus on affordability. Republicans would do the same thing they did under Biden, and that might be one of the big reasons that Trump was able to get back into the White House. So just to wind down the stats on the economy, here we are on civics, and this asks, how would you rate the condition of the national economy right now? 31% say very bad, 30% fairly bad, 29% fairly good, and just 6% say very good. So those are some weak numbers. Granted, Trump has still not been in office for 1 year yet. So all the things he put in place during the first few months, if there's not a positive impact being felt by the electorate over the next several months, by the time the summer comes around, that big blue wave could be developing. But to end on that positive note with gas prices, this is the 10-year chart here. It's obviously not the lowest on here, but it is lower than at any other point in the past bunch of years. If lower energy prices trickle down into other sectors of the economy, that could be something for Trump. But if they shoot back up up in the summer, then this is all going to be forgotten. Now let's go to number 3. This is the Democrats. And you can see this headline from Quinnipiac. Voters give Democrats in Congress a record low job approval, but still might vote for them in 26. That to me says everything. People don't like the Dems, but they're out of power right now. And if they're unsatisfied with who's in power, they're willing to give the other side a chance, even if they don't like them. So we've got 18% of voters approve of the Dems, 73% disapprove. And this is coming from Quinnipiac. And when Trump and the Republicans won in 24, the Dems were stunned. They thought that party was terrible on all the issues. How could voters support them? Well, if the pendulum swings back here in the midterms, Republicans are going to be saying the same thing. How could they have supported the other side? They're terrible on the issues, etc. Each side tends to get in there, they do a few things that voters like, and then they go overboard and do other things they don't like. And the other side seizes on that, and then they get back into power, and the process keeps happening over and over. But the other main thing with the Dems is, what are they going to do in primaries? Are there going to be a bunch of primary challenges to incumbents? Are they going to go in a much more progressive direction? How's their candidate quality going to be? And yeah, it matters what the Republicans are going to do as well. But remember in 22, Republicans might have nominated some candidates that were a little bit too extreme. That could have cost them a few more seats. If the Dems do the same thing, they could also lose some more seats. And who's going to actually emerge as the leader with the Democratic Party? It's kind of a rudderless ship now. Maybe it's Newsom, maybe it's Harris, maybe it's Mamdani, maybe it's somebody else. But all the other potential candidates for 28, they're going to be posturing themselves after the midterms for when they might make their runs early in 27. But the real question here is, have Dems learned anything from their loss in 24? If they're just going to rely on inflation and Trump is bad, but then keep everything else the same, then it's just going to be a vicious cycle. I think the recipe for success for the Dems is to really back away from a lot of those off-putting social and cultural issues. At the same time, lean more into some of the populist economic issues. If it's just one or the other, then I don't think they've really learned anything. But that's really what keeps happening in politics. The politicians become scared of the voters and fixated on that next election and saving themselves. The other thing we'll be taking a look at here is the generic congressional ballot. Right now, Dems are up by about 4 points here on Decision Desk. Now back in the midterm under Trump's first term, they were ahead consistently by about 8 points. So this is not the big blue wave just yet, but I think at this point they would at least win the House if the election were held today. Can the Republicans somehow turn it around, or is this going to become a tsunami? We'll find out. The fourth thing here is going to be the Supreme Court. Now I know these New York Times articles always have these paywalls, but along with everything else, there will be a link down below in the description. This list sums up a lot of the court challenges to what Trump's done, and a bunch of them are probably going to reach the Supreme Court. I would imagine Trump would have success in a bunch of these cases, but not all of them. And depending on how these rulings go, that could motivate both sides to turn out in the midterms. So there is a whole ton here happening behind the scenes with all these court cases. And we all remember back in 22, the Supreme Court had the decision on abortion, and that motivated the Dems to turn out. Republicans did not have that big red wave they were hoping. So this is a big thing to be watching, but maybe even the bigger thing might be, is there going to be a Supreme Court retirement? Well, according to Polymarket, there's a 23% chance of a vacancy. Now this could easily change in a hurry, but the two most likely justices that Trump would replace would be Alito or Thomas. Now they seem to be the most conservative, the most friendly to Trump on the court, so he kind of hopes that they stick around. But since they're older, and if they do, there's a chance something happens. Dems get back into power, and they're the ones filling those seats. So I think there is going to be a good amount of pressure for at least one of them to step down next year. It could be one of the other justices as well. But even Biden got to replace Stephen Breyer. And even though Trump got 3 picks in his first term, I would think Republicans have got to replace at least one of them while they have the opportunity. It's not impossible the Dems could flip the Senate next year. Then Trump might have a real problem getting any of his nominees through for the judiciary. So this is a huge deal, but let's go to number 5. Of course, it's going to be the actual elections. Here's what we've got here. We've got the Senate, we've got some special elections, we've got the U.S. House. Then after that, there's going to be governors, lieutenant governors, attorney generals, etc. Ton of elections, everything could change in a hurry. Usually the party out of power makes gains, and that's what we've been seeing in these special elections this year. Dems have clearly overperformed. Republicans have faltered. It's not a shock, though. We saw under Obama in 2010, Republicans had massive gains. Obama also went on to win re-election 2 years after that. So things can change in a hurry. Political power tends to go to politicians' heads. But everything we talked about in this video leads up to this moment. And as I said earlier, who are Dems and Republicans going to nominate in those primaries? But way before November, we're going to have to follow these primaries. And here's the schedule right here. Things get going here in early March. Then they really get going in May and June. Now, personally, I think having a primary 6 or 7 months out from an election is just way, way too early. I think 2 or 3, maybe 4 months makes the most sense. It's weird when you get the nominees sitting around for a half a year before the election. As for the channel, it's really hard to say what I'm going to be doing during these primaries. In past years, I have done live streams for at least half of these. I know I won't be able to do it every time, but I'd at least like to be able to do a few. But again, it all depends on what I've got going on behind the scenes. If the channel really took off more, there was more support and more members and viewers, etc., then I think I would really try to do more live streams. As it is, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but hopefully we could get a few in. The last thing related to these elections is retirements. It's likely there's going to be a few more early in 26, but so far here on Ballotpedia, we've got 44 incumbents not seeking re-election. That's 19 Democrats, 25 Republicans. Plus we've got the map right here. If Republicans sense a blue wave coming, you could see more of their side decide to retire. But some of these Dems might feel that they could get a primary challenge from their left. That could also cause them to want to hang it up. A bunch are running for other offices. It's not unusual for several dozen to retire, but there could be a growing sense of frustration on both sides, especially with the Republicans because they're the party in power. And if it doesn't look like they're going to have success, some of them might want to bail. So we'll see if there's a flood of retirements that come in next year. But the elections are the main thing to watch in early November. But those are the 5 biggest things I think you should watch for 26. A lot of them are the same every year, but there's also a lot of subtle different dynamics at play. I'm sure it's going to be crazy. We'll see what happens, but let me know in the comments. What do you think about any of these 5 big issues for 26? We've got Trump, the economy, the Dems, Supreme Court, and the midterm elections. What do you think is going to have the biggest impact? What do you think is going to change between now and election day? Are there going to be any big surprises? Let me know what you think down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.